but it doesn't particularly matter. So, welcome everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Spirit Channel. I am your host, the Zenith. As always, I'm very delighted to have a very interesting person joining me for this episode. This is Neil Elliott. And Neil is an author. He is an author, and his new book, The Higher Road, is out now. It is a seven-step process to inner peace, joy, love, abundance, and prosperity. And I think the subtitle of that is Cleanse Your Consciousness to Cleanse Your Ego and Ascend Spiritually. Quite a catching title. I would imagine that anyone who's kind of looking along this process would be drawn to that, because as you said, it's a seven-step process, and it does all these things. So, sounds very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here today, Zenith. I know it's evening for you or late at night for me, but it's afternoon for me. So
No, I think when you look at the pictures, you would probably think the opposite is true because I'm in a brighter environment. But anyway, yes, look, this is kind of, we were just chatting before we went live here, and this interview has been quite a long while. I think you first contacted me a number of months ago, but for one reason or another, it just hasn't happened until now. So, it really has been a thing. And as I said, you seem to be an interesting guy for reasons that we're going to get into, because you approach spirituality in a slightly different way from a lot of guests and a lot of other people. So I'm hoping that there will be people that are attracted to this and can readily identify with your approach to this. So I'm just kind of wondering, because as you mentioned yourself, and like everyone has to have a starting point somewhere in their journey. I'm like you. I was never born like this here. I had an awakening of such, and it wasn't, unfortunately. No one said it was going to be a year, but certainly for me, that first year was crucial for me. And I guess, unfortunately, I never had a process to follow. I think it might have been easier if I had a process that I could have, or someone would have said this year, but I just kind of had to rely on someone who was helping me at the time, and then kind of find my own kind of way. But so a bit like you, I've been through so much that has taken me to this process. But now I can look at it in a completely different way, and utilize those experiences to help me grow, and share my experiences a bit like you. So, if you wouldn't mind, Neil, just give us a little bit of your background, where you've come from, because obviously you're an engineer as well. So what I'm trying to get at, that Neil kind of has a bit of a scientific approach to this here, or he blends science with spirituality. So just a little bit of background, whatever you're comfortable talking about with Neil.
yeah, and I'll keep it short for everybody, just so it won't bore them to death. So give you context. So born in 1960, so I'm currently 62 years old, and lived in Canada my entire life, just south of Vancouver. I've lived across Canada, but I've traveled the world. And second marriage, three kids, five grandchildren, and they're all Texans. And I'm a professional engineer with a master's of business administration, and I've worked in the hydroelectric industry for over 30 years as an engineer and as a project manager. In the 90s, so I'd be in my 30s, I wanted to, kind of be more inclusive in terms of how I thought, and be able to accept other people's opinions and ideas and things like that. So, that's when positive thinking came out. So I picked up books like Napoleon Hill and Tony
Mhm.
Robbins and Wayne Dyer, Carolyn Myss, those kinds of books. And I studied them, and they're all great authors, and they all had great processes. And I certainly learned a bunch of stuff. But I couldn't fundamentally change how I thought. As we grow, we program our subconscious mind, and each of us knows what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, what's true, what's false. And so, even though outwardly I could be more accepting of other people's ideas and thoughts, I never really could fundamentally change how I thought or necessarily agree with them. And in 2002, I went into consulting. And when you're in consulting, life becomes about work. If you don't work, you don't get paid. You take vacation, you don't get paid. You get sick, you don't get paid. So for me anyway, life became about work, 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 pleasing clients. Because if you don't deliver and you don't please clients, you don't get repeat work. And
Was this,
so,
sorry, was this when you ran your own business? Was this part of this?
yes, yeah. So I started my own business in 2002. Yeah, I was employed before that. And then I started my own business in 2002.
Okay, so
And um, between 2002 and 2015, I slowly drove myself into this really deep and dark, despondent depression. And we're all great actors in our environment. We all can wear this facade and we can project whatever we want to family, friends, and clients. And so no one knew I was there. My family didn't know I was there. My wife didn't know. But I was finished with life. I was, what's the purpose? I work hard. Make a lot of money. I spend a lot of money. I couldn't seem to get ahead. When I traveled to Europe, I love going to Europe. When I traveled to Europe, I was really happy and it was fun and joyful and, go visit museums and look at all the architecture and stuff like that. But, day-to-day life was just a misery. And so I picked up newly issued spiritual books and some science books, and I went through this process like I did in the 90s. And new spiritual teachings and new processes and new information. But again, I couldn't fundamentally get at this subconscious programming. And our house had been on the market for 5 years. It finally sold. And in November 2017, my wife jumped on a plane to go to Toronto, Ontario, Canada to visit family and friends. And I sat down at this little one-bedroom rental kitchen table in an apartment in the city and planned out and crafted my suicide note. And the suicide I planned out for about 3 months to ensure that my wife would be financially okay and that I could say goodbye to loved ones and friends without them knowing what I was going to do. Coincidentally, and it's not coincidental, I can say that in retrospect now, but coincidentally and fortuitously, this information came to me about a week prior to me sitting down to craft my suicide note. And I promised to liberate my thinking if I followed it. So I finished out my suicide note. I had it all planned out. I put it away and I said, okay, well, I'll push out my suicide from 3 months to a little further. I'll study this material. If it makes a difference, great. And if it doesn't, I can always pull the trigger. And I was looking for any little sliver of hope to kind of keep going, right? And I had this little even though I'm not Christian, I grew up agnostic, this little nagging doubt that if I committed suicide, I'd end up in this bad place. So anyway, I studied this material. And almost a year to the day, I woke up. My depression was totally gone. I was full of this inner peace and love and joy. And I felt totally prosperous and abundant. And 13 months later, so the end of December 2018, I went into 2 meditations where the spiritual energy flowed in through my head and it filled my body. And then it just enveloped me and cradled me in this unconditional love. And it's a unconditional love we don't have the human language to even describe, but it was just so beautiful and so amazing and so comforting. And I felt non-judged and I didn't care what aches and pains my body had. And I didn't, care about what anybody had done to me in the past or what I perceived anybody had done to me in the past. I didn't care about what I had done. I just wanted to stay there forever. And I came out of that meditation and 2 days later, I had the exact same meditation. And at that point, I knew that the new knowledge I learned and the process I followed was our truth, was an absolute truth. And at that point, then I just wanted to share it with everybody. And I thought, okay, well, get on the rooftops and I'll share this. And I thought, conceptually thinking that and thinking I'm going to be looked at like an idiot, so I won't do that. And it took me a couple years. And over those couple of years, this has been ever evolving and deepening spiritual awakening and new knowledge and new information coming to me as I evolve through this process. And it took me a couple of years to figure out the best way to do this, write a book. So it took me about a year to write the book. As you said, the book's title is A Higher Road. And what I do is in that book, I share this journey that I went through. So the book is in 5 parts. So the first is part one is really kind of an overview of what you're going to learn. Part two is this really candid memoir that uses my life. And I'm very private, but I thought it was important to be candid. So I wrote my memoir and I use very candid examples of the patterns of thinking and feeling that I adopted that created every event and every experience that came into my life and eventually took me to this point of suicide. And we all do this, but we do it unknowingly and ignorantly, and kind of we just don't know we're doing it because we don't understand the mechanics of the universe and how and why we manifest these things into our lives. And part three of the book is a chapter in consciousness and also some scientific material that I followed. So I'm just laying out exactly the process I went through that brought me to this awakening and this new state of being. And part four of the book is I call them truths. So I unveil truths that I learned and provide links to some of the information that I used, well, all the information I used. And in part five of the book, is my experience as I kind of traverse these, as I went through these 7 steps. And so my recommended way to read A Higher Road is read it from cover to cover, understand the process in its entirety. If it resonates with you and it makes sense, go back and start with either some of the science material or start directly with step one. And if it doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. If you've bought a print copy of the book in hardcover or paperback, I ask, I either keep it on the shelf to read it, 5, 10, 15 years in the future, because it may make a difference to you then, or just, pass it on to somebody else without colorful commentary and let them discover for themselves whether this process works for them. And if it does, I can tell you it might be the greatest gift that you give anybody in the world because it can totally transform their life.
Yeah,
I have to
yeah.
do an eye drop every now and then. So I'm just going to do that right
No,
now
no,
while you're
you're absolutely
talking.
fine. It gives me a chance then just to riff on what you were saying. I think of when we have that awakening, and I can really understand that feeling of that unconditional love. And I have the exact same words as you do, that we have never felt a love like this, because our love that we offer and feel on this planet, whether we like it or not, agree with it, comes with conditions. And what that means is that, you love your wife, you love your kids, they love you in the exact same way, but sometimes harsh words are spoken, sometimes feelings come into it, and even if it's just for a second or two or a minute or two, whatever the case may be, sometimes that love is just slightly diminished. It's just gone for that. And I think that the love that we feel from these higher realms, from these higher beings, is in such a way that there's nothing that we could do would ever, change that love for us for a second. And I think that's my definition of unconditional love. And when I felt it, I didn't understand what it was because I'd never felt anything like that. But when it was explained to me, it was someone put a rocket up me. And you're right, people could have said the most horriblest, nasty things that they wanted about me, and that wouldn't have changed anything. It's just this feeling of bliss, of unconditional love, of protection, of as you said, transcends words. It really does. And when you feel that, it's a natural thing to want to share that, because it's like you're coming alive for the first time in your life. It's like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. It's the world isn't monochrome anymore. It's filled with color, and you just want everyone to experience that. So it's really interesting. I can understand that, and as you rightly say, unfortunately, because we're not accustomed to them feelings, And because we're not accustomed to opening up about this sort of stuff, we walk around with masks on all of the time. We portray aspects of ourselves to other people, and it's not quite how we are inside. And I think that what you're trying to do is through your book and through what you're talking about is tell people that there's a different way of living, a different way of being, and it's so much better than the way that we're currently operating in our societies.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And you've said that well. You know, we're like method actors. You know, like a method actor, they have a part coming up in some, kind of period piece. And so they dress the part and they behave the part and they speak the part and they eat like that period piece, even when they're off film, right? Because they're really trying to get into character. And then they get on set and the director calls action and they're really in that. They've really adopted the behaviors and the patterns and the speech that period piece is. And they come across in that role, really believable. And then the director calls cut, and the actors in that role, they can kind of come out of that and they can go, oh, high five, like really great. You did a great job there, right? You like, I was so believable. And this process, and we can talk a little bit about this, but this is an evolutionary process of the soul. And so what happens is that when we're young, our little mind, the little eye of ego mind, believes that this body is solid and our externality is our reality. And we let our externalities drive our actions and reactions to life depending on how we have programmed our subconscious mind. So we can talk more about this process. But,
Yeah.
um, you know, in reality, what you see is merely a reflection of your beliefs. If you can change your beliefs, you change what you see. And as you go through this process and you evolve, and it doesn't happen overnight, could take a year, could take 5 years, could take 10 years, whatever. It doesn't happen overnight. But you come to understand that your reality is your soul. Your soul is your truth. This is just a tool. This body is not solid. This body, we know in science today, this body at a subatomic level is only energy. There's more space in this body than solidness. But we perceive it to be our reality and we think it's our truth. And we identify with all of these things that happen to us. And we become victims or we become aggressors, whatever we're doing. And this is just the tool of the ego to help our souls learn the lessons that it wants to learn while we're here on earth. And when you come outside of that and you enter into this truth, and I'm going to tell you that, you can't get this perspective until you actually enter into it. And that's what this process is. This process is how to cleanse your consciousness so you can begin this process to transcend your ego. You come out of this and you come into our truth. And you understand that we live in this duality. Our souls are our reality. And our souls are here to express unconditional love to everything and everyone in our environment. I mean, where we come from is unconditional love. Where we return to is unconditional love. We are not here to please God. We are here to express God. And this whole process enables you to get to this point where you understand this duality. Then you identify with the reality is your soul, and this is just a tool. This is just a mechanism for you to learn these lessons. And your overall goal is to get to this point where you can, no matter what anybody's saying to you or doing to you or what you're experiencing, and you bring unconditional love to that moment, to that experience. And even when you're fearful or you're afraid of something and you feel that fear, I mean, your goal is to be this channel and not block that energy. You receive that fear, you feel that fear, and then you need to release it. And you need to release it by, blessing it and bringing love to it, and then it'll go and it'll dissipate back into where it came from, into the nothingness from which it came. But it enabled you to have this experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I'll add one more piece here just to give everybody overall context. And so, if you come from unconditional love, if you can understand this, you come from unconditional love, and if that's all you ever experienced, be, we'd never know these other feelings of fear and victimhood and aggressive behavior, debased action, all of these other things which are contrary to unconditional love. So when our source of our being wanted to experience itself, it needed to create this process to allow us to come here to this school we call Earth, to be able to feel this multiplexity of feelings of joy and fun and abundance and laughter and humor and all of the other things that are contrary to it, the hate, the denigration, the murder, the victimhood, all of those things. And by having that experience of that, what you do is your soul is a fragment of divine consciousness that is here as part of this process to learn these lessons, to feel these things. But we are unified in the divine. We are one. And so all of this richness comes back to expand and allow our creator, if you will, or source of our being, or God, whatever you want to call it, to have a richer experience, a richer feeling of experiencing itself and all of these things which are contrary to itself.
Neil, it's it's like hearing myself. You're speaking my language. You really are. Everything that you've said is just the stuff that I've been bleeding on about, in my things. It's exactly the same process that I've been through. It's exactly the same philosophy, the same learnings that I've been through, that I've come to know, that I seek to well, perhaps not teach, but to share, perhaps in a different way. And it's so I guess you're right. We can talk about it, but ultimately the best way to do this here is to experience it. And although I could sit and talk with you for hours about this process, I do want to, because I have an interview to conduct here, I do want to bring it back to that there. So I, we could just sit here and talk about this idea of unconditional love, what it means, and all these different levels, and how we are this great creator experiencing itself, and what we're here to do is provide an experience for this creator to understand what it's like not to be a creator, and to, enrich, as you say, that creator's beingness through this, cellular evolution, including the very kind of low um, evolutionary state that we're currently at. But I guess for people who are watching this and maybe who have not been through the same process that you have, that I have, they're probably going, okay, well, this is great. How do I get that? How do I get what you guys are? Because that sounds fantastic. Yeah, and we could compare experiences. We could compare our astral travels, our higher states of consciousness, our gifts that we've received in meditation, that have helped us. But again, people will probably go, well, that's okay for you two guys. How do I get that? I want to, experience that. I want to maybe transform my life. So this is why that you've written this book. This is why that you've come up with this plan, this idea where you've married some spiritual terms with scientific terms, and formed a book which are going to take people through this process that you've been through. So I guess what we need to do then is talk a bit about the book then, and how you approach that, where you got your information from, and how you said, okay, I need to put this information into a way that maybe is a bit more palatable for people who want to understand the process that I've been through.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you're right. That's exactly what the book is written for, is for people to, uh, you know, is for people to have the opportunity to learn this new knowledge and make a decision for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very logical, well, at least I think it is, a very logical and rational and believable process. And so let's talk a little bit about that. And so I'll talk a little bit about, so I'm going to come from, this is all my experience, okay? So first thing I had to do was, and so all of this is laid out in A Higher Road. And so first thing that I had to do was get a new concept of consciousness. So this part three of the book will take you through the process that I went through to develop this new understanding of consciousness, and then it will get even further expanded in part four and part five. But part three of the book takes you through this process where I'll give you a couple of highlights. So I used to think that everything that I thought was in my brain was something that I had learned, experienced, been exposed to over my lifetime. And so the first thing I had to do was understand that, what I think is really just a belief. And so I used to think that it was in my brain. And then I read some scientific books and stuff that got me to understand that consciousness is not only in my brain, it's in my entire body. And indeed, it's all around us.
Mm-hmm.
And I now see my consciousness or my thinking as a stream of thoughts that go by my awareness. I pick a thought out of that stream. We all do this. We pick a thought out. We do this in a nanosecond. If it is a thought and that is consistent with the patterns of thinking and feeling that we have programmed in our subconscious mind, then we keep it. If it's something that's contrary to that, we just throw it back in the stream and away it goes. And so the first thing I had to do was understand that, because all these spiritual teachers talk about this: change your beliefs, change your life.
Yeah.
But the problem is, how do you do that? Well, the first thing you need to do, or first thing I needed to do, was understand that everything I believe to be right or wrong, good or bad, true or false, is really just a belief. Everything is just a belief. Even the truths that you're going to learn is just a belief. But when you actually go through this process and then you experience it, you get the inflow of spiritual energy. So I'll call it the divine. You get the inflow of the divine that supports you and inspires you. You will know that what you now know is true. And so first thing I had to do was do that. So I share some other authors that help you go through this process. The second thing I had to learn was that what you think affects your biology. So you, through your thinking, affect the expression of a cell, and the expression of a cell is the work that it does, and you either promote the well-being of those cells or are contrary to it. Then I learned some stuff with neuroplasticity and how we can, through processes, change how the neural pathways in our brain, like how things move through the brain. This is all at a high level and concepts that you'll all understand. Pathway through your brain, and you can grow new brain cells. That's an important piece, that you can grow new brain cells. They used to think prior to the 1960s that the brain, grew to a certain size and then it atrophied over time. And that's not true. You can grow new brain cells. And then so this is all expanding now, my concept of consciousness, and getting to this point of opening me up to be able to accept these truths that I share in part 4 of the book. So the next thing that I learned was, and it was through reading another author and her near-death experience. And there's an author that suffered from an aggressive form of cancer over a 4-year period. She went from she was in her 40s. She went from a normal body weight down to 75 to 90 pounds. She couldn't lift her head on her own. She was on oxygen 24 hours a day. And she had, her body was riddled with tumors from her waist to her head, some the size of lemons. And she had these open cuts and weeping lesions on her skin. She fell into a coma. They rushed her to the hospital. The admitting physicians told her husband and family she wasn't going to make it through the night. She woke up 24 hours later, declared she was going to be okay. And within 2 weeks, they couldn't find a trace of cancer in her body. Wow. And so they don't know why or how that happened, but it's all medically documented. So being an engineer, I like things that, you can observe, calculate, you know, that you can prove with math, those kinds of things. And I like things that are documented. So these are all things that, kind of was laying this foundation for me to open me up, understand, a new concept of consciousness. So she came back with some specific messages and many, but a few of them were: we come from unconditional love, we return to unconditional love, we're not judged after death. That gave me permission to sit down and craft that suicide note because I believed that then. And that she felt like she was becoming a part of everything in the universe. So she felt that her description is that everything, um, everything has consciousness within it. Be it a tree or a rock or a plant. She felt like everything had consciousness in it. And so that opened me up. And then I got this blueprint document, and I call it that because I don't want to share exactly what it is, and I'm being vague about that, because what I want the reader to do is go through this process I went through that opens them up so that they will accept this information. This information is marketed and positioned in such a way that, a year prior to that, I would have run from it. I wouldn't
Yes.
even considered reading it. And you need to come to this information in a really open state, and you need to be curious and like a little child, full of wonder, full of joy, full of curiosity. And if you can do that, and you can understand and read this material and keep any negative thoughts, any doubts in abeyance through positive affirmations, however you want to do it, but don't dwell on the things that immediately your ego wants to reject. And I think we need to talk a little bit about the ego too,
Yeah.
just so everybody has a concept here. But these truths, what they do is they bridge this gap between spirituality and science. And they do it in such a logical and rational and believable way that for, I think, a lot of people, for me in particular, it just made so much sense. So it enabled me to follow this process to cleanse my consciousness, to rebuild my consciousness, and to learn this meditation, which enabled me to enter into this state of silence and stillness in my mind, like stop all my thoughts, and to build new brain cells underneath the skull at the top of the head, impressed with new knowledge that you learned. So, about 7-month mark, I felt this little tingling at the top of my head, and I didn't know what it was. It was about the size of a dime, and it felt kind of weird, but I'd never experienced that before. But I just kept on with the process.
Yeah.
And over time, that grew. So probably at the 9-month mark, it might have been 4 inches in diameter. And then the spiritual energy would flow into that. And I realized that what was happening was I was building new brain cells, impressed with new knowledge that operated at a higher vibrational frequency.
Okay.
Our human consciousness is at such a low vibrational frequency, and the source of our being is so spiritually refined and at such a high vibrational frequency that it can't enter into us and make itself known to us until we start to raise our vibrational level of our human consciousness. And our source emits unconditional love unstintingly to everything in creation. But until you start to build these new brain cells impressed with new knowledge, and you go through this process, however you get to this process,
Mhm.
till you go through this process, it can't make itself known to you. So as I went through this process, about the 9-month mark, I feel the spiritual energy coming in, and I realize, oh, I'm building these new brain cells impressed with new knowledge. They're operating at a higher frequency, and it's enabling me to make this connection back with source. And then today you could put a bowl over my head that's below my ears, and that's how big that opening is. And I have constant and mutual reciprocal communication with the source of our being. I get inspiration, I get direction, I get instructions about what I should be doing or what I could be doing to further me along this process. And nothing happens overnight. Everybody's got to know. There's no instant gratification here. There's no fast food. It takes time, energy, and effort to do this. But I tell you, it is so worth it. It is so amazing. And when you get to this state where, you and I are currently at, it's like you view the world so differently, and you just want to help everybody, kind of get to this state if they're willing to listen. If they're not interested, then just hold your peace. It's
Yeah.
not your place to push your beliefs onto other people. If they're curious, then absolutely share. Anyway, so you go through this process of these 7 steps of this, opening your consciousness. You're going to initially start with this, and you'll be instructed how to do this, but you're going to write yourself a letter, and you're going to really be honest with yourself, and you're going to be truthful with yourself. This letter is not to please a God. It's not to show to your spouse or family or friends. It's only for you, and it's for your growth and your development and your purpose. And so you need to be really honest. And when you write this letter, you're going to ask yourself some questions. One of them is going to be, are you really happy with life, or would you rather be done with it? And you've got to, like, you're not fooling anybody. This is where you just write down really how you are. And what you're going to do is you write this letter with the instructions given, and you'll seal it away. And if you follow these 7 steps, you'll put it away for a year. And then what that does is that provides you a starting point, a marker of where you were at, because your consciousness is going to totally be evolved and transformed over that year if you follow these steps. And and then you're going to go through this process where you need to cleanse your consciousness. And there's a very specific list you're going to start with, but you need to cleanse your consciousness of all things that we have programmed and adopted, these patterns of behavior and thinking, which is contrary to unconditional love. Any judgmental thoughts you have, criticism, judgmentalism, denigration, slander, devil and devious dealings, lying, falsehoods. There's a list of things that you are going to begin this process to cleansing your consciousness. And then as part of this process, you're going to rebuild your consciousness with, I'll call them golden aspirations of the divine. And these are things that you are going to learn and you're going to understand, and you may not get them all right to begin with, but that's okay. It's this process of this ever evolving knowledge. And those will maybe evolve for you over time. And you just continue to rebuild your consciousness so your consciousness is congruent with where we come from. And then you're going to learn this meditation that's going to enable you to go into the silence and stillness of your mind and make this connection back to source. And then you're going to do a rinse and repeat on some of these things. And as you go through this process, it's very logical, it's very rational, and these concepts in science that bridge over to spirituality are so believable and understandable. As you go through this process, what you do is you're building your faith, you're building your understanding, you're building your new knowledge, and at the same time, you're impressing these new brain cells with new information. And then you make this connection with the divine. And when that happens, I can tell you your life changes, like totally changes. And as you evolve through this, like for me, that was 2018 when I had these 2 meditations like that. So we're in 2022 now, so it's 4 years, right? And I can tell you, it's just, I couldn't imagine this, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years. This was something that was just so off the radar for me. But it is so beautiful, and I'd love everybody to be here
Yeah.
on this journey.
Yeah. It's just exciting listening to you because I've been through, a similar process, and it just gets you excited all over again to hear someone else share their journey. It's such a beautiful, beautiful thing to experience, and everyone really does. No matter. I think a lot of people go, well, "There's nothing wrong with my life. I'm fine. I don't need anything." But this process shows you how ordinary and drab and dull and I don't mean that in a negative way, but as I said, it just goes to show how you were living your life in monochrome, where this process shows you that there's color that can be brought, and I think it brings up a lot of things that you didn't realize. That your life was lacking, that you were completely, enamored by and happy with things that really are transient, that are really pointless, are kind of meaningless. The physical aspect of our life, the things that I talk about this until I'm blue in the face, but anything that we're attached to, our houses, our vehicles, our property, our money, our jewelry, whatever else, all those type of things that we think bring us happiness, and that we become attached to, we begin to realize how transient those things are in comparison to this, because it's truth, it's love. And once you have that truth and love, then it just brings this entire state of consciousness and awareness to your being, that you cannot help but want more and more of it, and to have that experience fill your life every day. And when you go through intense meditations and experiences like you have, they're mind altering, they are soul altering, they are experiences that you will keep with you your entire life. And it's kind of like breadcrumbs, I guess, where these kind of breadcrumbs are being put down for you to keep you hungry, to keep you wanting more, so that you'll keep on growing and keep on along this process. Um, so it really is amazing, and there was quite a lot that you had said there that I was just kind of going, I'd love to, stop right there and kind of cut off and talk about this and talk about that. But I think the one thing that stands out for me is that when you were talking about this marriage of scientific and spiritual, and that's kind of sort of where I am at now, not quite as in really exploring science, but trying to find this kind of, rather than just this, oh, it's just spiritual, it's spirit, it's a spiritual world. Them terms just don't quite resonate with me, and I think that for me, it's kind of like, not quite scientific or not quite spiritual, but metaphysics. That's what I'm kind of interested in, the metaphysical properties of our universe and our evolution, and how these things, um, what these things actually mean. For example, you're talking about this opening in the back of your head and had grew larger. And the first thing that came to me, well, this is what people talk about when they're talking about upgrades, but they don't actually elaborate on what an upgrade is. Well, what is an upgrade? You're just coming out with this term, upgrades. What does it mean? Whereas what you're explaining is a process. You're explaining how it happens, where it happens, the length of time that it kind of takes, and how it, kind of manifests and stuff. And that's what I find, a lot more interesting than just somebody saying, oh, we're going to get an upgrade, or you're going to experience an upgrade, or things. So that's my kind of area of interest, this kind of metaphysics, when it kind of marries this, our current understanding, or perhaps more than our current understanding of physics, with these kind of spiritual terms. So I really connect and really understand that there aspect of it. And I'm kind of at a point now where I don't even like using the term kind of spirit, where people just go, well, it's spirit, but like, what does that mean? What do you mean by spirit? Oh, you mean these kind of, higher dimensional, higher vibrational frequencies? And I guess one of the things that actually just comes to mind to me, and you'll obviously be very aware of this here, it's not that they're spirits, as in they're just this woo. It's because, we only see on a very, very small fraction of the visible spectrum of light, that we think that these things are, spirits, or they're kind of these things that are in this kind of fairy world. It's just that they're a spectrum and a frequency of light that we cannot perceive with our human senses. So I just thought I'd kind of throw that in there to see where you.
Yeah, no, I suspect that is true. That they are definitely at that. Like let's talk about meditation for a minute. I'd like to come around to the ego, and let's talk a little bit about some of the
Yeah.
science stuff. to give everybody a little bit more flavor and a little more context.
Sure.
So uh, my meditation. So you can start with whatever you want, 10 minutes a day if you're not used to meditating. Whatever you want, build up to whatever you want. I don't want to scare anybody away here, but I meditate without fail every morning between 90 minutes and 2 hours. And it is the most beautiful and wonderful and amazing experience. And not every meditation is really successful because as you go through, it's successful. It's just whether you are at a state where you can actually feel the inflow of things. So as you go through this process, this spiritual awakening process, everything in life has a rhythm. There's the fall, there's the winter, there's the spring, the summer.
Yeah.
And it's the same with your spiritual development. You are going to experience this blossoming and this newness of energy and newness of life and these spiritual moments. And it's gonna, you're gonna, it's gonna blossom in the summer and then harvest in the fall, and then it's gonna have this slowly dying away to winter and this rest period of winter. Your spiritual progression is going to be the same thing. You're going to go through this spiritual spring of this new awakening, and it's going to be better than what you experienced before, and it's going to go to this blossoming and this harvest, and then it's slowly dying away. And that dying away, it doesn't mean you can't feel the connection with the divine anymore. You feel like you're not feeling anything or making any progression. But what you need to do is keep your faith and keep going with the process. Because what it is that your vibrational frequency has dropped to this low ebb. And our source of our being is still emitting all of this unconditional love and learnings to you. You just can't feel it. But you're still transforming. Your consciousness is still transforming, and you're just not aware of it. And then what'll happen is, and that might be a day, a week, a month, 3 or 4 months. I don't know. It's going to depend on the person and where you're at. And then all of a sudden, you'll come into this spiritual spring again, and it'll be better than what you've ever experienced in the past. And so you have to know that everything in life has a rhythm. The tides have a rhythm.
Yeah.
Day and night there's rhythm. There's a rhythm to everything in life, and it's the same with your spiritual growth. And let's talk about the evolutionary process of the soul for a moment. So, you are incarnated here in this school we call Earth, in varying genders, in varying places of origin, varying colors of skin, different religions, sometimes not religious at all, sometimes wealthy, sometimes poor, sometimes highly educated, sometimes not educated at all. All of these things are to give your soul the opportunity to have all these varied experiences and learn lessons that it wants to learn. And at some point, your soul will be able to prompt and wake up and understand what it's doing to itself. We have the creative power of the source of our being to a very limited, minuscule extent. What you think with electrical impulses in the brain, you feel with magnetic impulses in the nervous system. The electrical impulses in the brain is a consciousness plan. The magnetic impulses in your nervous system, being a loving feeling or a hateful feeling or anything in between, magnetizes this consciousness plan into the blueprint of a future event or experience that you will eventually magnetize strong enough through repeated thinking and feeling to experience that same thing, a rebound form come to you to experience a like event or experience into your future. And we create thousands of these every day, and we're drawing these things and manifesting these things into our experience. An accident, a winning of a lottery, a new friend, whatever it is, a bad situation at work, whatever it is, an illness. we're doing this moment by moment, and we can never link because we don't want to understand these mechanics of the universe, but we never link the thinking and the feeling that we've had that created this blueprint that manifests this, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 50
Yeah.
years in the future into your life. And when you actually gain this new knowledge to understand these processes in a very logical, rational way with things that we know in science today, and you will know them from a conceptual level. You don't have to be a scientist, you'll know them from a conceptual level. You can then understand about how all of these things come into your life, and you can make a conscious decision to actually change your life or carry on with what you're doing. And if you want to change your life, this is the process to go about doing it. And so in my book, I describe how I unknowingly, unwittingly, and ignorantly in 2011, manifested a $60,000 Lexus hardtop convertible into my life. I thought, oh, I'm just lucky, $100 lottery ticket. I got this car. But I did something every day for a year, not even knowing that this was part of a lottery that I was going to purchase. But I did something every day for a year that manifested this blueprint, reinforced it, magnetized it, and then drew this Lexus to me in this unknowing and surprising way. And later in my book, what I do is I describe the actual mechanics and mechanisms of the universe that I put into motion and reinforced through my thinking and my feeling that I did every day that manifested this car. So it's a real life experience, understandable experience of how we do this. But we do this with everything. We do it with things that we like and things we merely endure and things that we hate. Everything that comes into your life is the full accountability conversation here. Everything that comes into your life, you have created. And when you understand these mechanics of the universe and how all of this happens, you can then make this conscious decision to actually undo this and get yourself congruent with the source of our being, which is the overall evolutionary process of the soul. So it's only through lessons of suffering will the journeying soul gain self-knowledge to retain individuality after discarding the ego. So your eventual process here is to, in whichever lifetime it is your soul to wake up, to begin this process of cleansing itself and rebuilding itself to be congruent with the source of our being, be it takes one lifetime or 20 lifetimes, I have no idea. And eventually, when you have fully transcended your ego in whichever lifetime that is, this body's ephemeral, it returns to dust, but your soul steps into the light and it will not need to be reincarnated here again.
Yeah.
And this is your eventual purpose, is to come back to be reunified with the divine and to retain your individuality. You are a unique expression of unconditional love. And through this process of evolution, your soul is shaping and honing and hewing its personality to be this unique expression of unconditional love that it brings back to the richness of the divine. And so how do we do this? Well, we do it because this process is that the ego is a tool in created. So so you're going to learn what was before the Big Bang, the impetus for the Big Bang, what happened at the time of the Big Bang, and how this material universe came into form. And then you're going to understand that these tools of electromagnetism are primary impulses which are locked in an embrace in equilibrium before the Big Bang, and they have been torn apart, and we see them as electromagnetism in this manifested form. And so the ego is this tool to create this individuality out of the wholeness and the unity of the divine. Your soul is infused in the process of conception, and the little I mind of ego is created at the same time. The little I mind of ego can only use the tools of manifested form in this material world of electromagnetism. So as it develops, as you develop from babyhood, excuse me,
Yeah.
as you develop from babyhood to, age 5, you're this little sponge that's just absorbing everything into your environment. Your the culture you've been born into, the family you've been born into, their feelings, their emotions, their thinking, their speech patterns. And at age 5, the brain develops where it can start to make decisions on its own. And then you go to school and you learn all these other things, you have all these other experiences. As we grow from babyhood to adulthood, we think we're becoming versed in the ways of the world, but really what we're doing is we're shutting our soul off from the light. We're binding it down with our patterns of thinking and feeling that the egoic mind has developed and taken on, and then we start to create all of these events and experiences that come into our life through our thinking and our feeling. And at some point you wake up, your soul wakes up, understands that this is what's going on, and then begins this process to cleanse itself and to your goal is to enable your soul to gain mastery of your life, to express unconditional love to everyone and everything in your environment, and to bring that love and that healing to every event and every experience. And when
Beautiful.
we do that, eventually, as life is an inward journey. It's got nothing, all the peace, the security, the love, the joy, the abundance, and the prosperity that you are seeking, it's all inside of you. And you have to go through this process of this inner journey and this connection back with the divine. You need to understand this process. And if you understand these mechanisms and gain this new knowledge, you can unlock this and you can go in through this process that brings this connection back to the divine. And the more of us that do this, we will eventually bring this world into this new era of love and peace, which is the intended outcome of this whole awakening process.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's beautifully said and beautifully expressed. For me, it's almost like you're undoing a lifetime of brainwashing. It's where we're kind of undoing everything that we've been told and everything that we've done. Because I think also as well, when we are that age, we're very connected, as you say, still to the divine, and through our ignorance and through our peers' ignorance, our societal ignorance about this stuff, we're told to behave and act in certain ways. We're told to grow up. We're told to stop playing imaginary friends. We're told there's nobody there. This is the real world that's in front of you. And of course, knowing no better, we accept that as truth. And so we go through a lifetime. Some of us are probably a lot luckier than perhaps me and you, that they wake up a lot sooner. But it can be hard because you're trying to undo almost a lifetime of brainwashing and conditioning through people who have been through the same system as you, and know no better. And it can lead to this kind of cognitive dissonance, especially as I think that one of the points you were making at earlier. If you jump in too fast, if you were to reveal everything that you kind of know now straight away to someone, they would reject it because it's too much information to handle at once. They would face cognitive dissonance because it's a threat to the status quo that they have come to understand. And this is why it's important that someone takes a book like yours and reads it, as Neil says, from cover to cover. This is a step-by-step process. You don't come into this process straight away, straight awakening. It would be too much. It would be too much overwhelming. And so you begin to allow yourself to undo that conditioning piece by piece. And as Neil says, to cleanse your consciousness, to remove that ego which keeps you in check. And for a lot of us, as you turn around and say, that one of the greatest ways, and potentially the greatest way to do this, unfortunately, is by what we would call trauma. Because unfortunately, that is generally the one of the greatest, the only way that's going to make you stop in your tracks and generally go inside yourself and look and do that work that's needed upon yourself. because unfortunately there's really not much else that's really going to completely stop you from that. That's been my own experience. I think that's been yours too. It's when you get those really great traumatic events that force you inwards and then allows your ego to not run your life and allows that connection to develop, as you said quite rightly. Then that's when the healing process begins. That's when the awakening process begins. For me, there is no difference. Healing is probably the fundamental part of our journey. Once you begin to awaken in this process, then cleansing our consciousness is a healing.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And just so everybody knows, you don't have to be in a deep dark state to do this. It's
Yeah.
just that you know, if you're in a state, if you're open and curious, and like for a lot of people, or for me anyway, and you as well, I guess, um, you know, it's questioning life, like why are we here? What's our purpose? But really, you know, I was in this deep, dark, despondent place, and it's like, what's the point? I don't want to carry
Mhm.
on anymore. You don't necessarily have to be there because it's going to
No.
depend on your evolutionary journey yourself. But, it's an opportunity when you are in that kind of a state. This is when I think it's great to be able to give people a process, give people hope, give people thoughts and ideas, but they still have to accept them themselves. They have to be open
Yeah.
to it. And so, there's lots of people that have pretty, they seem to have pretty happy lives. And I'm going to say that because you can never really judge the inner reality of
Yeah.
another person, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be in that negative state, but that doesn't mean anybody can awaken. It really just
Mhm.
depends whether they're accepting and whether they're willing to do this inner exploration.
Yeah.
Uh,
Just
it's
just to
it's
qualify
certainly
that. Just a quote, please, nobody listening to this, don't go out and seek some sort of negative or traumatic experience in order to help you.
yeah, yeah,
That's
no,
not
no,
what
don't
we're
do that. Yeah, you don't have to. You
it's
don't have
simply
to do.
saying is
You
that
don't have to do that.
being in that state is, it really does force you to kind of look inside, but you don't need that, you know, condition or state in your life. It just happens sometimes like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, exactly. It's just yours and my journey. That's just
Yeah.
the state that we got into to make that happen, and that's okay. Unfortunately, some people get in that state and they end up committing suicide.
Yeah.
Because they
And
haven't.
it's very tragic. Sorry to cut you off, but it's so, so tragic to hear that because, like yourself, I've been in some very, very dark places, and them thoughts have run through my head where I've thought, it'd be better if I, just remove myself from this world. And thankfully, it didn't happen because that's where I found something in my life that just changed my whole outlook in life. I found this material, and it just, for me, it made sense. My entire life, began to make sense then. But um, when you've been through this process, when you're at the stage in your journey where you are now and where I am now, and you hear about people who commit suicide and take their own lives, you feel so much despair because you know that if only that person, encountered something like I encountered, if only that person had been put into my path or someone else's path who could show them that there is a way out of this.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There is a way out of it, absolutely. But again, everything happens.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's no. It's not right or wrong, good or bad, true or
no,
false. It's just it happens for a reason.
yeah,
And anyway, so uh, I think that's kind of the book actually, gives you these tools and gives you an opportunity to totally transform your life if you're open to it, right?
yeah. It sounds
That's the
amazing.
reason I wrote the book.
What I wanted to ask you about was when you were writing the book, did it flow? Did you, what was the process for writing it? How difficult did you find writing it? Did you really have to sit down and think, how am I going to marry this, technique that I've learned to make it more palatable for, a kind of more audience so that they would have an easier maybe time of it than I did? Or did you find it flowed? Did you find that you were inspired to write it? Obviously we talk about authors and people think that they've been inspired. They just had this wonderful idea. And for me, it's not that potentially you've had this one. Well, it is and it isn't, but kind of knowing, because I do a lot of writing myself and I do some sort of channeling, and I know when I'm being inspired to write. I know when ideas are being put into my mind.
Yeah, so a little bit about this evolutionary process for me. I started out with one concept, an idea, and I crafted it out. And over time that evolved, and I got inspiration about, no, do it this way, do it that way. And it was this evolutionary process that it took me a year to put it together, and then go through a 3 month process to get it published. So putting it together, like with editing and stuff, right? But and then this whole publishing aspect is another thing altogether. It's like a whole other thing to learn. So just getting the cover, what do you want on the cover? What font do you want? What color do you want? Like there's a whole process there. How do you want it laid out? What kind of
Yeah.
font do you want in the book? Like that kind of thing. Anyway, it's like building a house and understanding that there's, if you've ever built a house, you'll understand, and you're really into building that house, you'll understand all the things that need to be decided. Like, you need to understand, where do I want to put electrical outlets? How high off the floor do I want to stick them? How big is my baseboard? How thick is my baseboard? What kind of door handles am I going to put on? What kind of doors am I going to buy? What kind of kitchen cabinet handles am I going to stick on? What kind of counter am I going to get? Like there's just thousands of decisions that you
Yeah.
make when you're building a house, right? So it's the
Yeah.
same thing. It's like, that whole process of, oh yeah, I got the book written and it's edited now, but that whole thing of afterwards, wow, there's a lot that has to happen. So,
Okay, right. Interesting. One of the questions that came to mind there when I was listening to you was, there was something that you touched on earlier, where you were just felt that there was nothing worth living in your life, um, that things had just gotten so bad, and I understand that that was because of the circumstances. Um, for me, in my kind of journey, I'm wondering, is this the same sort of thing, or can you relate to this? I found the world about me drab and boring and dull and grey. I've talked about this, in just other things, but for me, kind of like it was when I found out magic wasn't real. That was a big blow to me, and I thought, oh my God, there's really nothing in this world. Is this it? Is this all there is? Kind of akin to finding out that Santa Claus isn't real. That innocence is lost, and I found that the world then that lay above about me was drab and boring. And it's only when I went through this process I began to realize that that's what was missing in my life, and this is what why my soul was calling to me. Yeah, because I started, trying to dull that pain with alcohol and drugs and stuff like that, because I just felt that this life was boring. There was nothing in it. It was because my soul was kind of calling to me, and just kind of wondering, maybe when you look back at your life, do you potentially think that that could have been maybe why you allowed yourself, or one of the reasons why you just spiraled into that depression, because you were looking for something more, you didn't know what it was at the time?
oh, like, so I look back now and I go that all of this is just, this was all, everybody has free will. So you can make any decision you want in whatever direction you are going to go. So don't think that life is, kind of, don't be fatalistic about life or anything. But I'm going to talk about it in a way which, don't misinterpret what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't think that you're totally, it's all preordained about what you're
Yeah,
doing. But
yeah,
you come in with a life, you come in with a lesson plan. Your soul comes in with a lesson plan, and you make decisions with your free will that enables you to follow that lesson plan. But the timing of that is going to be maybe different, or I can't speak to the nuances of it, but all of this is divinely ordained. My life, like I look back now and all of the things that happened to me that I had regrets about, or wish it didn't happen to me, or boy, if I had only made a different decision now. I now look back and I go, all of those things were really a blessing. It's a good that I decided that, because they got me to this point where I said, what's the point of life? There's got to be something more to this. And if there isn't, then I don't need to be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
and so so for me, that's the thing that got me. And then the science books and this other, it was all kind of laying this foundation for me to give me a concept and understanding of consciousness, to enable me to open me up to see these new truths that I share with people. And so
Yeah.
that's the process in my book. I take people through the process I went through, in the hopes that that same process can help them.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think just for me, looking back at my own life, and was kind of like clues along the way. I'd look at the things that maybe I was interested in, or some of the experiences that I had, and I think, as you're right, that it all ultimately led up to this point where I am now. It's just, you didn't understand at the time, you just weren't ready for it at the time. It just wasn't quite right for you. But you think you're absolutely right. We come into this world with a life plan, that we, things that we want to achieve, that things that we want to learn and grow from. And ultimately, I don't quite know if everyone achieves those goals, because we have agree to forget. But I think we do receive triggers along the way, that help us, to wake up and understand what it is that we've come here for. But it is just kind of fascinating looking back along your kind of life path, and seeing that all your experiences have kind of led up to now. I think that a lot of people will don't quite understand that, and this is what we're trying to educate people, if you like, that you can't want to go back and you can't change any aspect of your life, because everything that's happening to you is for your highest good, and is trying to help you achieve this awakening that we're talking about now. It's just that it's so much misunderstood, a lot of the things in our life.
Well, and I agree with everything you just said, and I'm going to say it in a slightly different way, but it's going to be the same thing. Is that, it's because we identify with our, what we see, we think is our reality. What we feel, we think is our reality. And we let externalities drive our experiences and reactions and events in life. And that's because we have gone through this process of programming our subconscious mind. So this body's like a rented vehicle. Your soul's in there and your ego is in there. And it's like a self-driving car that your ego has programmed the self-driving car. Now your egos can still have conscious control. Oh, I'm going to take this corner. But on a lot of times it's autopilot of all this pre-programming. And this pre-programming is your belief system, your thinking patterns, and then they're associated with these emotions. And so your ego is in control, and you've bound down your soul with these bondages and these chains and handcuffs and whatever you want to, think of. And they're in the passenger seat. Your soul's in the passenger seat. Your goal is to go through this process to unbind and release your soul, so that it can take over control of the driver's seat, and also reprogram your subconscious programming, or what your ego is programmed into the self-driving car. Your goal in the end is to let your soul gain mastery of that driver's seat of your life, and become this expression of unconditional love. And until we go through this process, we don't get there. So that's why, I had said earlier that it's, you in a past lifetime might have had, there's probably things that I have done that I would, in past lives, that I would consider totally reprehensible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But all of those things were events and experiences to get me to this point where I am today in this lifetime. And so I judge nothing. I don't judge what anybody does. When I see somebody today, I see their soul is equal to my soul. Their soul is unconditional love.
Yes.
Anything that they're doing is merely that their ego's in control, and their ego is doing all of these things to help them learn the lessons that they need to learn, that they want to learn in this lifetime. So what I try and do is bring unconditional love to that. Am I always successful with that? No. Does my ego jump in sometimes and take control of my responses in life? Absolutely. I'm a work in progress. Like, it's happening, but our goal is to get to this point where
Yes.
our soul has complete mastery of our life, and we're not letting our ego take control. And then our ego is this divinely ordained tool to keep us protected, to ensure that we run away from the lion or step away from the moving bus, to bring us food. And when you get to this point, you will be able to manifest anything into your world that you want. But everything that you want to manifest will come from this spiritually enlightened center, and you'll only be asking for things that are good for your family, your community,
Mhm.
your country, the world. You won't be doing anything from a selfish, greedy, narcissistic, personal perspective.
Beautiful, beautifully said. Really, really nice. So then, what? Just to wrap up this interview, then, so what do you think maybe the future holds for you? Have you any more kind of plans? Are you going to maybe take the book in a different format? Have you any more plans to do any future books? Obviously you're on this path of wanting to share, wanting to inspire, wanting people to wake up. Is there anything else beyond this book, or maybe a different kind of sidetrack or whatever that you maybe have in mind?
So, at some point I'll do an audiobook of this book. So that'll be a different format of this book. But, I feel that the inspiration for another book, which will be like, this is an introductory book. So I would almost say this is an introductory book to get people, to lead them and to get them to the path of this awakening. But now that I've progressed for 4 years, I would say that there's another book that's going to be more, um, if I can use this word, rich with my experiences and my new understandings at this new and deeper knowledge, to try and help those people that are, already on this path of awakening, but maybe inadvertently misled by some spiritual teachers. And the reason I'm saying that is because, pure, like, if you pour pure, pristine water into porridge and mix it with the porridge, it takes on the consistency of the porridge. It's no
Mhm.
longer pure and pristine. Spiritual energy, when it flows into a human mind, takes on the consistency and the concepts of human consciousness, and so it gets mixed and can get contaminated, and so that things that people teach might not be totally um, congruent with the spiritual energy that came into them. And the lessons that and the information that I'm sharing with people did not come from me. This information was put through a spiritually receptive mind that had been systematically cleansed over a 40-year period, so that it was as least contaminated, and I'm going to say not contaminated at all, but at least it came in as pure as it could
Mhm.
for people to read and understand. But I can tell you that, this information, when you read a paragraph or a page, I read a page or a paragraph when I first started this, I had one idea of it. Every year, that same paragraph, or every few months, that same paragraph or page I would read, I have an entirely new concept of what I was reading. The spiritual words of enlightenment can never be fully comprehended or immediately understood by the human mind. And it takes this evolving process. And then as you evolve through this process and you get more inspiration and deeper understanding, these whole concepts just take on new meaning and this new depth of understanding. So I think a future book will be sharing some of this further insights that I've had.
Okay, lovely. So obviously, then, where can people find you and find this book? Then, if they want to reach you, if they want to follow you, if they want to read the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go over the book. So the book is called A Higher Road: Cleanse Your Consciousness to Transcend the Ego and Ascend Spiritually. A 7-step process to inner peace, joy, love, abundance, and prosperity. It's by D. Neil Elliott. The website is dneilelliott.com. An easy way to get there is ahigherroad.com. All my social media links are on there, but to be honest, I have not been doing a lot of social media stuff. Um, and the book is available globally wherever books are sold, in print or your favorite ebook form, Kindle, Apple, Nook, Kobo. You can get it via Amazon if you have Amazon in your country, in print, or immediately through Kindle. And if you buy my book and you read it, please give me an Amazon review. It's the only way that authors stay alive these days. Is this has become kind of the
Yeah.
Bible of kind of authorship, unless you're a New York Times bestselling author, right?
And you also have a supplement as well, isn't that correct? Available, but you only recommend reading that supplement after you've read the book.
Yes. So I recommend you read A Higher Road from cover to cover, understand the process in its entirety, and then go back with step one, or go back with some of the science material, or start directly with step one. When you get to step two, I explain how you get access to this blueprint material that I used. And I've assembled it all into a PDF and reformatted it so it's easier to read. Um, but I've put it all into this, so I provide that for free to people when they get to that step. They follow that process.
Fantastic. Well, I've really, really enjoyed having you on. Really found someone that speaks my language, is in the same process that I am, is still evolving along with what I am. So it's really interesting talking to you, and we could really talk for hours about some of these topics. And it's just been so nice, just this back and flow of just kind of developing these deeper layers of information and understandings. Normally, I ask people to leave with a kind of inspirational message, but I'd hope that perhaps you leave us with that beautiful little statement that you received in meditation. If you know it off the top of your head. If not, I have it here and I can read
Oh,
it
why
out.
don't you tell me which one I've got lots.
It
So
starts
which
with
one's
love.
that?
It starts with
Pardon me?
love. Love is love.
Oh, yeah, the yes. Love is, yes. So love is soft, gentle, kind. It embraces, enfolds, enshrines. It is patient, understanding, sublime. Love is all these things. Let it shine. Did I get that right?
You absolutely got it right. Fantastic. Because the reason I wrote it down is because there's no way I'm going to remember some of the things that I've got. So very well done. Congratulations. Beautiful statement. Beautiful statement. It really does. It deserves more attention, and I'm really glad that you shared it on this broadcast. Neil, thank you so, so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. It has been so interesting, and just listening to someone who's along the same path as me is just so inspirational, and it just gets my excitement all over again. I really do hope people will buy this book. To touch one is to touch all, but everyone just needs to be in this process. As we talked about in this here, you honestly do not know what you're missing in your life until you've awakened to the power of love. So please, people, do buy this book.
Yeah, well,
Neil,
thank you, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I'm glad we've had this conversation,
yeah,
and I'm also glad our consciousness fabrics are now intertwined.
yeah,
So we'll be
absolutely.
connected when we leave this world.
I'll see you along the path somewhere.
Exactly.
Neil, thanks very much. Bye.
Th- Thank you. Bye.